Hello, Torae.
Yeah, what's going on, Torae?
I'd like to welcome you on the Short Funk podcast. I really enjoyed your album Entitled, and you had the opportunity to work with a number of amazing producers. So as our time is limited, I'd like to talk to you in particular about working with the producers.
Okay, that's cool.
So you've worked with Premier for a number of years, and Premier's style has changed through the period of time that you worked with him. When you first started working with Premier, what was it like?
For me, working with Premier early on was special just because I grew up, I think like most of us, we grew up a fan of his production and, me being a New York guy and just hearing how much he shaped the sound of the city and really had a nice foot in that golden era of hip hop. For me, working with him was just amazing. He was on my bucket list of things I ever wanted to do in my life as an artist. And, those first few times was definitely special. And every time in the studio with Preem is very special to me. But those first few times definitely, because it really changed the landscape of where my career was going.
In terms of actually working with him initially, did he present you a beat or did he give you an opportunity to come and attend one of his production sessions? How did that work?
Yeah, we went into the studio and he made the beat right on the spot. We sat there, we chopped it up. He went through samples, just went through vinyls and pulled out samples. And then once he had something he thought he could use to work with, he asked us to step out of the room so we couldn't see all the little tricks of the production. But, we went into the lounge and watched a movie or two and, he called us back in the room maybe an hour later and played us, what was the skeletons of the first productions that we did.
So now you've worked with him for a number of years. Does he show you those secrets now, or is he still secretive associated with his production techniques?
Nah, that's just his style. He likes to, we'll chop it up beforehand. We'll talk about what we want to do beforehand. But when he gets in there and starts actually making the beat, more so out of respect, I kind of step out the room, but also because, that's just kind of the theme. It's like, I go to the lounge and do that and he makes his beats and then we come back together and we figure it out.
So recently Premier has been working with the musician Adrian Young. Is he now using Adrian Young exclusively or is he still sampling?
That's probably a Premier question. I wouldn't know the answer to that. I actually know he does have something really, really dope coming up right now, but I'm not at liberty to discuss it.
Fair enough.
But yeah, those are definitely Preem questions. But, I think no matter how Preem goes about figuring out how he wants to produce, I think it's always going to be very dope just because he's rooted and, authenticity and his sound is very hip hop.
Certainly. In contrast, you worked with Pete Rock on the most recent album, and Pete, certainly in his interviews, seems to indicate that he is remaining a purist in terms of the sampling and even the equipment he uses. Can you talk about working with Pete Rock?
Yeah, working with Pete is dope, man. Again, another guy who was on my bucket list. We haven't worked as much as him and myself in Premiere, but, I think our two records are really, really solid. The difference with Pete was that he had gangs and gangs of beats. And so he would send me folders. He would send me folders of beat CDs, and then I go through and I kind of pick out maybe one or two that I like. And then we take it from there.
Interesting. So he'd present you a library basically, and then you could pick from the library what you wanted to record on.
Yeah. I think he would probably send maybe like 5 beats at a time or something like that. And, of the 5 or 10 beats, I definitely would pull out 2 or 3 that I like and then just figuring out, what to use for the album, what to use for what, and, how to go about doing it.
And in terms of like the final points of production, I guess when he's adding scratching and various things over the beat, having had you record already, are you part of that as well? Or is this something that goes on separate from you?
No. I like to get in the studio. I love the fact that I actually have relationships with these guys. It's not just hit my manager, send the money and blah, blah, blah. I know Premier, I know Pete Rock. So we go in the studio together. When we did Get Down, I went in, shout out to my brother Dan the Man at Pro Town. I recorded the vocals and Pete was there and, then Pete listened back to it a couple of times and he figured out how he wanted to do his drops and his mutes and things like that. And, it was a fully organic situation. We were all in the studio together, collaborating, in full and not just emailing stuff back and forth.
Very cool. So you also worked with con artist, aka Mr. Porter, on Entitled. In terms of his particular production style, I mean, obviously he's seen as both an artist and a producer. What was it like working with Mr. Porter?
Now, for Mr. Porter, aka Denon, we actually did not get in the studio together on the actual song, but we chopped it up and he sent me a few beats and I really liked the beat that I selected for Crown. And I told him what I wanted to do on it. And he was like, dope, let me hear it once you're done. I sent it back to him, and he loved it. He loved the feature that I put on it. And then he had it mixed by his, on his side. And then he sent it back to me, and, the mix was solid, and that was that. So, partially because he had his project out there, partially because he lives on a different coast, and partially just because we were both running around. We couldn't get in the studio together. But I think our record is really solid. And I love the fact that he brought something different to the table sonically, that was still able to fit in the confines of what the album was, but it had a different feel to it.
How important is it to pay dues in hip-hop? I mean, I see a lot of modern artists that don't appear to be paying the same dues that people have paid historically. Is that something you feel as an artist? And can you talk a little bit about the importance of paying dues?
Paying dues in what manner?
Well, in terms of like referencing, a lot of your tracks reference like cultural aspects and periods of time in hip-hop. And modern artists, just purely through the form of, drill music and things like that, the form is not historically the form that hip-hop has normally taken. So they don't have the same legacy that they have to like reference and command. Whereas you actively reference periods in hip-hop, your tracks are very well, cultivated around certain sounds, in part through the production you use. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of paying dues? Yeah,
I think for me, it's just that, I was inspired by a certain period of time and a certain sound. And I think maybe some of the newer artists, who didn't grow up in New York City or didn't come from Brooklyn or, didn't really fall in love with hip hop in the 90s might be inspired by something different. And so that's why we have different sounds. But for me, it's always important to make sure that I pay respect and pay homage to the artists that came before me and work with the people that inspired me to make music, because I feel like that was a really intricate part of my decision to go into making music, is because I was inspired by these people, because I saw these people, I heard these people making music, I admired these people. And I think it kind of shines through in my music, but still with a current, a current storyline and a current indentation of it, but definitely showing respect for what came before.
I have a question about Apple Music, because I find Apple Music fascinating in one regard, but I also think it might potentially do damage to artists. Have you spent much time thinking about Apple Music? Your stuff was available, Entitled was available immediately on Apple Music. In terms of an artist, how do you feel Apple Music will shape, the future of how music is consumed?
I think as an artist, you have to embrace it. There's nothing you could do. You could sit back and argue and complain about music not selling the way it used to sell, or people not getting out there and buying vinyl or buying CDs the way they used to. But you got to take into account that everything changes, just like the 8 tracks and the cassettes before us, you gotta be ready for what's happening in the world. We're not watching big floor model black and white TVs. Everybody got a flat screen on the wall. So, I think the way that the music gets delivered to people is no different. And I think one of the upsides of an Apple Music is, say I have a core audience, 10,000 people, 20,000 people, they're going to go buy the album. And then there's another, 10, 20,000 people that have heard of Torae, not enough to really want to go out and buy the music. Now they have the option to stream it and listen to it, and it really doesn't cost them anything but a little time. And I think that you can gain new fans that way. And also, if somebody just buys my album one time and spends $10 on it, that's great. I appreciate it. It helps. But I think that if you can stream the album every time you want to hear it, and I generate a little revenue every time you stream the album, that'll help in the long run, financially for the artist, because it's not just a one shot, $10, boom, you're done. It's a continuous stream of people listening to it over and over and again, and it constantly generating revenue every time they press play.
Torae, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Short Funk Podcast, right?
Yes, the Short Funk Podcast.
You contributed to the Kickstarter, so I just want to thank you. I shouted you out at on the shout show. I'm sure you heard.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely appreciate the support. And anytime you need anything from me, just give me a holler and we'll make it happen.
Terrific. I'm very interested in Sirius Radio actually as a form, so I might hit you up on that.
Not a problem. You let me know whenever we make it happen.
Take care.
Take care. Peace and love.